Ladies and gentlemen, how are you doing today? My name is Robbie C, and I'm here with the one, the only, ABB. How you doing today, Mr. All Business Brad?
Good, man. It is all business in this warehouse. We are just at full steam. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of discs in front of me. We're trying to organize inventory, get up on the site. Got a lot of exciting stuff happening this week, especially. This is Friday, so you've already learned that we signed Ezra Robinson. So that's very exciting.
Dude,
we have
huge.
Yeah, 10 years, 10 milk, as you saw. So big deal for us. He's got that milk money now.
Milk money.
You know, I think, at this time we already have learned that Brody, he moved his Dark Horse store over to Foundation's warehouse. So we have all of that in-house now, which is exciting. So going through a ton of stuff, a lot of throwback, like really cool stuff there that I haven't seen in a while. I know it's been up on Discraft's site on and off, but maybe revitalize some of that, some of the stuff maybe you missed, or you like, oh man, I'd love to grab another one of those, like get sneakies, get beefies. It's always a passion. I mean, we got all kinds of stuff over here. A lot of stuff will be sitting out for like tech steals and stuff too, because there's some signed stuff that will be awesome to do on a tech steal. But we got a lot cooking over here, is what I'm trying to say. So it is all business this week.
Man, I like when behind the scenes, everybody, as any good organization does, there is messaging platforms that we use. And one of the best parts about all of us who don't get to live in Lynchburg or we don't work at the warehouse is when orders arrive and things like that. Like sometimes we'll get some, sneak preview pictures in-house. And the Dark Horse stuff has been a light to see every day, because it is exactly what Brad's saying of like, dude, like so many things that you were like, oh yeah, that's awesome. I remember that stamp and thinking, I wish I would have snagged one of those. Mm-hmm. And now via Foundation, it's back. So, but we'll give more of a chance to highlight at the end because we have a special episode. We want to say Absolutely. First off, we had a guest and his son. We're hoping all is well, and his child. And so, prayers to you, my brother, and your child. So we want to make sure that if you ever come on our podcast, people, and life comes up or something comes up, no hard feelings from us. Like we
life is last minute. Life happens, especially with children. So it is not a big deal. And we're gonna pivot. We like to be creative and pivot, and you got to pivot sometimes, and that's what we're doing today. So I'm really excited. This was Robbie's idea. This came up on your live yesterday. You did on your Instagram. So this is fun. When we're kind of like planning before the episode, Robbie is like, well, I'll give you a minute to think on it. And I was kind of worried, but I'm like, man, I maybe have more opinions on this than I thought.
Yeah. And that's the best part, is this list could change as you're walking down the list, which I think is really fun. So the idea of the episode, and this is where comment section, I really want you to lean in as well. This might be, hopefully this will be our most engaged with video on YouTube yet, as we've uploaded videos. But the idea behind it is, if you want this flight, you should throw this disc.
Right.
And so often people will trap themselves, and it's a bag building issue. How many times, you guys, we're hundreds of, like we're over 100 episodes in, and we have heard person after person who, I have this disc in my bag. And I just kind of have to quit that disc because I want it to be my flippy fairway driver, and it's just not. Or I want it to be that straight option. It's just not.
Right. And I just want to say, and that doesn't mean that disc is bad. It's just like not for that person. And when we get into the episodes and the topics, like, we're not bashing on any company or any disc. It's just literally like, and it's cool, Robbie, from your perspective and my perspective, your perspective as someone who's played for a while and as a coach, versus my perspective as someone who's just an amateur that plays disc golf. And do those opinions line up? Do they not? Are they different for you from me? I think that'll be interesting to kind of explore.
Yeah. Yeah. So the idea here is that Brad and I both wrote down 5 molds. And we're saying, if you are trying to bag this mold, you're trying to bag mold A because you want it to fly like blank. We would suggest that you bag mold B because you want it to fly, because that's the actual flight that you're looking for.
Right.
often out of the disc. So, Brad, do you want to start or you want me to start?
I'll go in. I think this is not a. If you've listened to any of the last maybe 20 episodes, you'll know that this is not a shocker at all. But I have some beef with like the Roadrunner, and and I think like looking at flight numbers, right? I think looking at a Roadrunner, and then let me look up the exact flight numbers here, just so I'm not.
Can I take a shot in the dark when you pull it up? I want to see how it see if I can guess these numbers.
Okay.
You let me know when you're ready.
Yep.
I think it's 9.5 minus 4.1.
Correct. So yeah, 9.5. And what I think happens is like, I think a beginner, and you start, you grab a destroyer and like, a Raptor and a Zeus and all that stuff. And you're like, oh wait, then you learn about stability. And then I think you start learning about flight numbers, and you look at the Roadrunner and say, oh, well, I want to get in the driver game. It looks like it's going to be pretty flippy, so I should be able to throw it, with a lower arm speed, blah, 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 blah. And then you go and grab it and you throw it, and it like is overstable for you. And you're like, what the heck is actually happening right now? You're trying to get distance. You're trying to get like something that's straight to turn for like a slower arm speed. And you throw the Roadrunner, a champ Roadrunner, and you're just like, I don't know anything, and I hate disc golf. And you quit, and then that's what happens. So again, no beef with I think the Roadrunner is great. And again, I think maybe it flies more like that for maybe like you, Robbie, or like, Hunter, Trevor, like pro level, like up in that kind of arm speed and that distance. I think it's probably more accurate to flight numbers. It's definitely flippy and will turn for you. And I know people roll them once they get beat in. But I think if you're a beginner and you're looking for that flight, you want something that will maybe flip up for you on lower arm speed or push straight or whatever. I think you need to go to the Diamond, because I think number one, it definitely has more glide, and it's an 8-speed versus a 9-speed, I believe. And I think it's definitely as understable as the flight numbers would dictate. So what are your thoughts on that, Robbie?
Yeah, no, I think that I really like this. This play. I've just started a series on my channel called Shape Your Game, and kind of talking about like toolbox shots that you need in your toolbox to attack. And I'm doing a separate series that drops next week, powered by Prodigy, that is going to be all about like approaching. So 2 separate videos, but the one in Shape Your Game, we start with Hyzers, and someone in the Birdie fan was like, I can't wait for the episode on Hyzers. And I think about even the guest we're going to have today doesn't have a big forehand. So he relies on these understable discs to create a forehand shape. And I think you nailed it, that people walk up and they want this like easy flip out of a Roadrunner. And throwing anhyzers themselves can be difficult. And so we lean to the Roadrunner, these supposed super understable things. And I'm just not sure they're there. And the Diamond helps cross that threshold, I feel like. Not only because it's super understable, but because traditionally you can like they're almost all lightweight. Obviously, they make like max weight ones now, but since they're underweight or lower weight, lighter weight, whatever you want to say, they get past that like threshold easier of turning, which makes it, I think, a really phenomenal disc. And plus, it's part of Latitude 6. What's the name of the line, Brad? Like, what part of their like?
It's easy to throw.
Yeah. So
yeah, I think that. Again, I'm going to say this 100 times because I don't want people to get fired up. I'm not saying the Roadrunner is a bad disc. I'm just saying if you generically look at them side by side, the Diamond's going to fly the way you, especially from an amateur perspective, the Diamond is going to fly like you want the Roadrunner to fly. It's going to give you the flight. It's going to give you like some distance probably that you haven't found in a driver if you're like newer or you're struggling to get out past like 250 or something like that. I think that's going to be a good disc. Now, I will caveat, if your form is like not great and you're like burning them over on Anheuser, you will feel the pain of that disc.
Yeah.
But, I think just generically pulling them off the shelf, the Diamond's going to be more accurate for that flight than the Roadrunner.
I think that is very well said. Very well said. My first disc is one that has not been in my bag for a long time. It's in my bag right now. I'm running a series on it. That is the Buzz. And the Buzz, the most iconic mid-range of all time. I think that is a fair statement to make. The Rock certainly wanting to be in that conversation and probably is in that conversation. But I just think that the Buzz the buzz is it, especially in the modern scene where I think Discraft is starting to sort of take popular vote. And I'm sure there are comments that are just like, you're just so wrong, not in my area. Bro. Okay, great. I am grateful for your area, and I am grateful that you guys are holding on to the resistance. But I think when people think of the buzz, they're like, the buzz is a do-it-all mid-range. It's super straight. Some people have buzzes that are overstable, but I don't find a lot of people, and that's sort of my problem with the buzz right now anyways, is I don't find a lot of people who are like, oh, the buzz is my, like, I just throw it and it's going to fade every single time. Like those runs of buzzes, I feel like are very, very difficult to find, or you end up moving to a Buzz OS or a Wasp or something like that. But what I think people think of the buzz, they want a laser straight mid range, because if I can have a mid range that does that, I can sort of adjust from there.
Right.
The problem is, while I would say the buzz doesn't fade every time, it does fade. Like I have to absolutely smash any of the buzzes that I have in order for them to not fade at the end of their flight. Like they just settle. And I'll talk about a disc next that does actually settle, and I think is really good. But the Buzz SS. So I talk about, like, if you want the overstable version of a Buzz, you move to a Buzz OS or a Wasp. I think the Buzz SS could be your answer, because it's easy flip. It's going to push, but also I don't think that you're throwing a Buzz SS unless you have the Hyzer form that Brad was just mentioning on the Diamond and the Roadrunner. I don't think you're throwing a Buzz SS and just expecting it to just burn over all the time. Like, you're not in fear of throwing this. And I think when people switch to understable discs for a straight disc, like a neutral to understable disc, that's their fear. I don't want this thing to run away from me and like burn over. And I just don't think you get that with the Buzz SS, and you really would find a laser straight mid-range that could make tunnel shots if you have wooded golf around you, probably make that job significantly easier.
Yeah, and I think to kind of just piggyback off of yours, I think when people see like pros throw a buzz and it like flips up and goes straight, like that's what people are expecting the buzz to fly like. And I think probably I haven't thrown a Buzz SS in a long time. I might change that, but I feel like for someone at like amateur level like me, that's probably the flip up straight Buzz version that I would need to go to if I want that flight.
We just got some buzzes, Buzz SSs,
all kinds of the Buzz SSs. Yeah, that's sure, that's true. Okay, so my next one here is, see, I have a special place in my heart for the Thrasher, and I also put like a side note here. I'm considering maybe putting it back in my bag now, or maybe like a Z Light Thrasher possibly. It's kind of I said I wasn't going above 9 speed, but I think I do need like 1 or 2 discs right there in that like flippier 10, 11 speed. Just I unlocked some form stuff, and I think I have some distance I can put on them now, but that's for a different episode. But Thrasher, I think if you're wanting like Thrasher flight, I think you need to throw a trail. I think that's where I'm going with that one. And I think just because I think someone who's trying to throw a Thrasher, here's my problem with a Thrasher. Depending on what plastic you get it in, Thrasher can be like overstable, and you're like, what the heck? How is this not like flipping up and turning? Because I believe Thrasher's what, 11.5 negative 3.2, I think is the flight numbers on the Thrasher. We're trying to do these all by memory, so forgive us. And then, you know, I think it's a little finicky because it is an 11 speed. So, you know, if you don't give it enough rotation, it's going to be overstable, which I think is my problem on a lot of them that I found at the time I was throwing them. I was like, man, this thing does not flip up. But I would throw it on forehand and I would flip it up to flat. So it's clearly a rotation issue, right? And I think just from an easy to throw, like flip up, go straight driver that's going to come back to give you some distance. I think the trail, like the more I throw one, the more I think it's just a great disc. And I don't typically like overmold drivers. Like I don't love how that feels, but I can ignore it for how it flies. But definitely, but it's not so understable that, at least for me, and I don't know about you, Robbie, but for me, it's not so understable that I want to turn it over necessarily. If I do like accidentally release a little anti, it will turn a little bit, but it's not going to burn over. And I think it's still gives me a nice flight that I'm looking for, where I can just kind of trust it to, if it turns, that's fine. It's not going to turn too far. It's not going to fade too hard. It's just going to kind of like push in like a certain window, left or right. And I'm focusing on distance, you know?
Yeah. Dude, the trail is just, I'm speechless about the trail, guys. I don't know. Like, I was talking custom discs with people prepping for Birdie Fam Takes Over Birmingham, and I was like, "Do we just put trails in the back?"
Yeah.
It's crazy how good this disc is. And like, you really could sub out any distance driver for the trail and lead it in. And I agree with Brad in that gyro drivers are tough, because if you cannot get them to speed, it's hard. They become absolute beef sticks. Like, it is, they're so overstable. But the trail, because it's a 10 speed, it flies like a 12 speed. It's awesome. It's awesome. I think that a lot of people, and hunt down the lightweight ones. I know the lightweight ones are hard to find, but if you can find one in the 160s, congratulations.
Bomb.
You've got a like gem on your hands. So I'm with you. I think that's such a good pick. And I think the trail is less touchy than the Thrasher as well.
For sure.
So
that's where the gyro does help, I think.
Yeah, it gives it that stability. I'm staying in the gyro realm myself on the second one, and I'm going hex. If you bag a hex, and instantly defense radars are coming up, and I'm fine with that. Because I think the hex is incredible. I think the hex is fantastic. But a disc that I had not really been too invested in, but was shocked when I threw it, was the Echo by Streamline. So here's why I think people bag the hex. They bag the hex for the similar reasons they bag the Buzz. They want a straight, easy flip up, straight, easy flip up mid range. That's just going to hold, and it's going to go super far. The Echo is separated in flight numbers from the hex by a 0.5 on the turn. Instead of a 5.5 minus 1.1, it is a 5.5 minus 1.5 1. I fully believe that is correct.
Okay.
That extra half that you get is the difference maker to me for those of you who you have a fission hex that's in your bag, that you keep trying to convince yourself that this fission hex actually stands up on a regular basis for you, and that it can easy turn for you, whatever you want to say. Like, I know the copium that we all take when it comes to our hexes, and fission hexes especially. Guys, I have a gorgeous, it was the first ever custom run of fission hexes that we did at Foundation. Brad, you hadn't been on the team like super long when it happened. I had not been interacting with Foundation super long when it happened. Like, I remember these. Like, it's like this swirly rims, Foundation logo stamp, beautiful. I bagged that thing for a year. I walked up to actual brick walls and just ripped my hex into those walls to try to get this thing to season in, because I wanted to swallow that copium. I threw this Echo fresh yesterday, and I was like, oh, well, that would have been a lot easier. It was crazy. And it was exactly, I mentioned that there was a disc that I talked about would just drop out of the sky rather than fade. And I think that was the Echo. The Echo did a phenomenal job in sort of pushing and then just falling out of the sky. Brad, you're a hex guy. You throw the hex. You enjoy the hex. Have you tried the Echo?
Oh, it's been a minute. You know who loves the Echo is Eli. Eli is a regular hex or Echo thrower. I think he bags 2 of them actually. But it's exactly what you're describing. Like it'll flip up because he's a Hyzer thrower. It'll flip up and like turn a little bit, and then just kind of glide and just sit down. It's like a beautiful, beautiful flight. And he doesn't like the hex. So because if I'm misquoting him, I'm sorry, but I believe he was like, I don't know, Dad, it's just not like, it just doesn't flip up. And I'm just like, okay, well, and he throws just pretty much as far as me now. So yeah, I think the Echo's that's a great choice. And because you were kind of like hitting my like sore spot a little bit with my fission hex that I've bagged for a long time. I'll like, what is actually happening is I'll kind of like pull it over and it'll like turn on me. It's not actually the disc, it's me. And I'm like, oh, this thing's flippy now. I can't even throw it straight. So I'll disc up and then it's like too overstable. And then I'll be like, okay, well, I'll throw the hex again and it'll go like straight with like a little bit of fade. And I'm like, what happened to this disc? So yeah, I get what you mean. It is when my fission hex hits, and by that I mean when I hit my fission hex correctly, there's nothing I'd rather throw than that disc. But there
go ahead. Yeah.
No, there are times on occasion that I'm like, what is happening with this disc right now?
No. And I think I could sub out, even if you wanted to say like not the Echo, I think I could sub it for the Origin as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like an Origin, if you're a slower arm speed, I would even sub the Echo for an Origin. Or if you throw on a little more Hyzer, then I would say, like, if your natural is a little more Hyzer, the Echo is probably good. If your natural is a little flat to Hyzer, then I think the Origin fits in there as well. Because I think about Jason, who also bags a hex and throws a hex really well. But then I think about, like, when Jason wants to score at New London, what does he do? He just pulls out his Origin and just throws his Origin all over that course because he knows he can put it on Hyzer and watch it stand up, ride straight, and drop.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah, I love that. Like, really from like the hex, because I have Eclipse hex, Fission hex. I have a Lobster back in now, Origin, Uplink. That's like my straight to understable lineup. And I just love all those discs so much. I'm really honestly kind of growing out of a few of them. Yeah. I think that's why the Lobster's creeped back in, because the Lobster does have a little more torque resistance than like the Origin. The Uplink is in my practice bag now, which makes me really sad. Yeah. But I'm not throwing it. Like, I'll throw it on occasion. So, but no, I might have to try the Echo out. I'm very interested. I'm intrigued, and maybe, because I think what gets me in trouble is like my Fission hex to my Eclipse hex is actually a bigger jump than I think. I think it's a bigger jump than it actually is, depending on how I throw the Fission hex that day. And I think I just get a lot of disappointment right there. And it's not the hex's fault; it's my fault. But I wonder if the Echo might make me have a little better decision making. Don't know.
Yeah. Speaking of decision making, right. you've got a mold that is really beloved in your bag.
Yeah, I love it. And when we were talking about this beforehand, I think this conversation goes either way. I don't think it's like, oh, if this disc bad, this disc good, right? It's like either or. I have Quake and Swarm, and I think that, I don't know. I just think that there's like, you could almost bag both of these in your bag, but I think people, at least for me, I was like, okay, Swarm, Quake, which one do I pick? And I just don't know that, at least for me, for my arm speed, I just don't know that they're the same disc. To me, a Swarm acts more like I'll call it like a, I don't know, like a Zone OS equivalent in mid-range. Like, it's that overstable for me, typically. And the Quake, depending, and again, I have an Eclipse, or what do they call it at DGA? The glow one. I have a glow Quake that's pretty overstable, but it's like very throwable for me. It's like overstable, but I can throw it far. The Swarm is like, it's overstable and I can't throw it far because it's so overstable. So I think that, like, when you're trying to find that like sweet spot overstable, like mid-range that is like reliable overstability, I think that like you could possibly bag both of them, but I think it's not a decision between the Swarm or the Quake, really. It's like, okay, the Quake for me goes, I can throw it far and it's overstable. And then the Swarm is more like, I just need complete beefcake. And that's what I'm going to pick. What's your experience with like those two discs, Robbie?
Yeah. So the Quake is super fascinating in that I think it handles it's a mid that handles forehand really well. Mm-hmm. And I just think that there's not a lot of like straight, it gives you a really straight mid option, which is solid. So I'm a big fan of the Quake. I can understand why people love the Quake. I think it's one of DGA's best molds. Probably top three.
Yeah.
Easy.
For sure. Sail, Quake.
Yeah. The Swarm I'm not as familiar with. I actually, because I have a different disc. I have a different disc in that slot. And people have tried to talk me into certain molds of that slot quite often. And I just throw it so rarely that it's really hard for me to get off of the one that I have in that slot.
Justice,
so I don't have as much
what...
experience. Yeah, Justice. So I don't have as much experience with the Swarm, but I did just in the shipment I got from y'all yesterday get a Swarm. So I'm excited to try that out and see. So unfortunately, I can't speak too highly on that. But thinking of Quake to Justice, which I think is a similar slot, I can see exactly what you're saying here. Of like, you want the beef. All right, like you keep trying to make this Quake be more overstable than it is. Jump up, easy peasy.
Yeah, you made a good point. So let me rephrase pretty much everything I just said. If you're looking for a very like Zone OS type overstable mid range, at least for like my caliber of play, Swarm is that disc. Yeah. Quake is not going to give you what you think you want. If you want a disc that is very overstable, again, for my level of play, but you want to be able to throw it on holes and like get some distance out of it, then the Quake is what you want. So again, they're kind of like either or, right? It's less of don't throw this, throw this, but it's more like what are you looking for? I think you're looking for the same thing, but there's two different discs you're looking for two different things, but there's two different discs. And for me, I had a lot of trouble determining what I needed in that slot.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks are trying to just bag one of those, right? Like, I think that's where the issue comes, is they maybe don't have that fast of an arm speed, and so they're like, oh, well, I can't really throw overstable discs because I only throw 280 feet.
Right.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm just going to bag either the Quake or the Swarm, and then they get frustrated because they bag the Swarm, but then on a hole or wind shows up and they have to throw, and the Swarm only goes 150 feet. And they're like, well, this kind of feels like a waste having it in my bag.
Right.
I think there's room for both. I think inside of the mid ranges, especially, there's certainly room for both. And I think you'll lean into both. Just finding that right spot is big.
Right.
So I actually go like where Brad just had this conversation in the bag. I'm going one step down, and I'm realizing as I look at my list, I'm fixated on mid ranges.
Yes.
Like it's a lot of mids, but I do think that there's logic behind it, because I think that because so many people don't like throwing mids is because of this hang up. Right. Where it's like, oh, I don't throw my mids that often because I don't know what they do. Or like I keep trying to make this one work and it doesn't because of something else. So I'm going to go to my Trilogy fans here. And the EMAC Truth, beloved, fantastic mid-range. It's so good. I feel like if I meet 5 amateur disc golfers, every 5th one has an EMAC Truth in their bag, or had an EMAC Truth in their bag at one time. I think about, once again, Jason has an EMAC Truth that pops in and out of his bag. My friend Andrew down here has an EMAC Truth in his bag. And I think the EMAC Truth is a disc that we want to hold straight and we want it to fade at the very end of its flight. I was talking with a friend Jay yesterday about this, which is probably why it's on the front of my mind. So Jay picked up a buzzsaw, the fused buzz, I guess is what we should be calling it instead of the buzzsaw, a fused buzz. And so he picks up a fused buzz, and he was like, I'm looking for something that flies a little more overstable than my EMAC Truth. I was like, well, tell me what your EMAC Truth does. In fact, let me guess what your EMAC Truth does. You threw it for like 4 or 5 rounds, and it was really fantastic. Went straight, had a finish. Straight, had a finish. And then it didn't even hit a tree. It just went through air enough that it stopped having that reliable finish. And so then you would step up to holes where you would be like, oh, I need it to finish, and it would hold 2 straight. So then you would put it on more Hyzer, and then it just wouldn't have any kick up whatsoever, and it was silly overstable. He was like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. And I was like, yep. Before I signed with Innova, I was going to sign with Trilogy, and that was my struggle with that mold, was I couldn't get it to figure it out. And at the time, it was COVID was booming, so you couldn't find verdicts, which is my answer. No one throws verdicts, and I do not understand why. Like, I just don't get it. Because I know I've talked about it here on the podcast before, but when they had the Truth, and then EMAC was like, I want a more overstable Truth. They made the EMAC Truth. But the first mold that Tomas came up with was the verdict. And he shows them this verdict, and EMAC was like, this is amazing. More overstable than I wanted it to be. It's like what I want, but just a step up more overstable. How he described the disc. Similar
Okay.
hand feel.
Yeah.
Just back a verdict, guys. And let me tell you, they're easy to find now. You can find verdicts
they are.
everywhere. Like,
Yes, you can.
it is stock verdicts. You don't have to pay like super expensive custom stamps. When I was trying to do this, the only verdicts that were available were these Lucid Chameleon Chris
Yep.
Clemens verdicts
Yep.
that looked like spaceships because they were so domey, but just in the middle. It like that was. You remember the adder, Brad?
Yep. Oh yeah. Okay. I can see that.
It was those, but on verdicts.
Okay.
Wild. They were so overstable. They were justices. But yeah, so verdict, guys. I think people need to try out the verdict. If you're looking for a nice overstable mid, I would say the verdict is like a Quake SS.
Ooh, I like that. I don't think I've ever thrown a verdict.
A stock verdict.
Yeah, I don't think I've thrown one, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
All right, so my next one is okay. So I think a common thing I see people in like the retail store doing is they're like MVP folks, they're fans of MVP, and they're looking for like that understable, like, well, I'm like understable today on these fairways, but so understable, like fairway from MVP, they want that gyro understability, and they pick up a virus, and it never fails. It's a proton virus. And so I think 9.5 -3.1 -3.51. Holy moly. Yeah. 9.5 -3.51 is what the flight numbers are. I'm sorry. If you're throwing 300 feet and you grab a proton virus, that thing is not going to be understable for you.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be. And like people bring them in all the time for the use boom because they're like, oh, I thought this was going to be understable, and it's just not understable. Or it's not understable enough. It's running into other discs in their bag. And unless I'm doing something very wrong, my experience with the virus is it's not very understable. It's not like flippy like you want. I don't think people want it to be like super flippy, like roller flippy, but I think they're looking for some distance. Again, a la the Roadrunner Diamond conversation. I think they're looking for something. They're learning about understability. They're wanting to like throw a little further, have something a little understable, maybe a little lighter weight, because you can get those in lighter weight, and just be able to throw like consistent straight or flip up straight shots with a 9-speed. So I have two things to say about this one. So
Okay.
if you look for a virus, I think you should throw a 169 Apex Jackalope. That's what I think you should throw, because it's going to give you the turn, like pretty easy turn that you want. I don't think it's going to be as finicky as something super understable, but it's going to give you a little, especially after you play a few rounds with it. It's going to be like a nice, like, you can probably flip it up. I think Jackalope's an 8-speed. You can probably flip it up even if you have a lower arm speed. If you like accidentally pull across your body and go Annie, it's not going to super burn out on you. I think it's going to be a pretty good disc and a utility disc. So I don't think it's going to jump and get. It's not overstable. It's not like super understable. I think it's going to be kind of like a workhorse that you're looking for, especially if you're trying to get into like that 8-9 speed realm with a disc. I think, and a Jackalope, I think is like has a very interesting flight that it will teach you how to like use a disc that will turn, but at the very end is going to come back, like not a ton, but slightly come back, and kind of have like that like longer, I don't know, longer Buzz SS flight. Maybe I would even say, Robbie.
Yeah.
Or maybe Echo. Maybe Echo's a little more accurate. That's kind of like what I kind of see it doing. Like it will turn, but it will kind of come back at the very end. So I don't know, somewhere in that realm. But I think Jackalope's a good play there. And I think the other mistake, the thing I was going to say is like virus, and like you go to like an orbital, which is very understable. And like I think there's like something missing right there for people, and I think they get frustrated. And I think orbital's a 10-speed also. But I think like a Jackalope is really, or something like a Jackalope is what people are really wanting. They're wanting something that will kind of turn for them, but they can kind of use that to their advantage. Maybe they don't have a forehand. Maybe they're like trying to get some extra distance, whatever. But I think the Jackalope's the way to go.
The Jackalope is a disc that it's like, I've always wanted to fit in my bag. I've always wanted to fit in my bag, because being friends with you and Jason, how do you not, right? Like, how do you not just love it? But I see the Jackalope go to so many people, and it's so good, guys. It's so good.
Yep.
And you get that same plastic hand feel, which is great.
Exactly. Without the gyro rim. So, which I think is what messes with the virus, by the way. Because if you're not getting it up to speed, it is going to be overstable or stable to overstable.
Yeah, that's fair. Totally get that. And at least not as flippy as you would want it to be. Like it may not even, like you said, stable is probably the best way. Because it may not be. It's going to be Roadrunner-esque. I think you're going to end up in the same struggle that you did with the Roadrunner.
Yep.
So 2 discs that we've talked about today that I think are beautiful discs, both fantastic. The Uplink.
Yep.
If you bag the Uplink or you want to throw the Uplink, and here's why you want the Uplink. You don't have a forehand, so you want easy turnover. You want something that you can throw at lower power and just watch it stand up and ride straight. Easier distance, just something that you can sort of turn your arm off and throw.
Right.
And that's such a weird descriptor of playing disc golf, but there are just times where you don't need to be throwing full power shots. And when you start realizing that as a player, it's going to change your game. The Uplink can get touchy. It can. I think that the use cases for an Uplink for lots of folks are very low. So what if I told you there was a more usable one and the Lobster? The Lobster's really good. Also mint. Has a great, keep that gyro hand feel. It is so good. The Lobster, like Brad said earlier, a little more torque resistance, which is nice. I just think the Lobster has all the characteristics that you're looking for and is a phenomenal flying disc. And I cannot tell you someone that I've recommended the Lobster to that didn't love it. Like truly. I cannot think of a single person who I've said, hey, you should try a Lobster, and they have disliked it.
Yeah. Completely agree with you. I think I'd also maybe argue that like an Uplink is a great starting point. I think some people keep it in their bag for exactly what you're saying. And I know it always comes in and out because I just love the Uplink. It's a fun disc to throw. And like a good example, if anyone's familiar with Timbrook Hole 3, the best shots I've ever thrown on that hole are with Uplinks. Just because I just stand in the front of the tee pad, stand still, low power, flip up, go straight, slide it up the middle. But I think you kind of grow out of it if you're trying to get better and you're trying to throw farther and you're trying to fix your form. I think that you just kind of grow out of its utility maybe a little bit, which is kind of like where I am. And you're right, like Lobster is torque resistant. It'll still give you that. If you power up on it, it'll still give you a beautiful turn. It'll turn all day for you, but it's not gonna burn unless you really mess up.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, you closing us out with what you got? What's your fifth?
Okay, this one's maybe like a little controversial, but like hear me out on it. Okay. I think that a lot of people, I think the Leopard and Leopard 3 are a good like fairway entry point for a lot of people. I think they're classic. I think people like lean on them a lot. Again, my issue with that is like depending on what Leopard you get or what Leopard 3 you get, I think it's going to disappoint you a little bit. I don't think they're going to like they're either going to be pretty flippy, like depending if you get a G-Star one or something like that, it's going to be pretty flippy. And if you get a Champ one, they're not going to turn like at all for you. So I think they can just be like a little hard to decide on. And I think like a lot of people end up moving away from it. And I find that like kind of like mid-level players will throw them a little bit more once they've kind of learned to deal with them, or maybe they're just Innova people. But I think the FD is a great starting point for like just trying to get some distance out of like a fairway driver. Now if you get like a green C line, it's going to like have some hook to it. So just be careful. But I'm going to say specifically S line FD, because I think it's going to teach you a lot about your form, a lot about yourself. It's going to be very throwable, but it's going to be like reliable enough that it'll give you some like grace on messing up. And I don't know, just an S-line FD just beats in like no other disc, in my opinion, for a fairway anyway. It just gives you such a great flight. They're like readily available. and I don't know. I think the hand feels great on them. I think they just feel really good. And I think that's just going to be a disc you can like kind of grow with. And like I don't think you ever have to really give up an FD if you don't want to. And again, Leopard 3 and Leopard, I don't think you have to give up either, but I don't know. This one's more of like a heart play than like a, I guess, logical play. Does that make sense? Or maybe there is some logic behind it, but I'm not articulating it very well. Because I did bag a Leopard 3, by the way. Halo Leopard
you did
3.
for a while, for some time.
Yeah, which I liked. Again, it was flippier than I thought it was going to be compared to like I wanted like a Hyzer flip straight with a little fade, and like that's what the S-Line FD did for me. So that's probably where that's coming from.
Yeah, I cannot understate the beauty of an S-Line FD off the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's there. Literally the only reason that I do not bag an FD is because I have seasoned in discs that do what that does. So and because I got them to that point,
mm-hmm.
that is like why they shine. Yep. But I think you've nailed it. Like it's not just a heart play. I think that more people should throw the FD. I think the FD is a better crave.
I would agree. Sorry, Sarah. Yeah.
Wow.
I think the crave is very different than the FD. I don't think that, I think what you're looking for again is the FD. Wait till you throw that swirly one, Robbie, that we sent you out of the December box.
Yeah.
I just like one day I got home, hole one at my home course is like right beside my driveway, the tee box is. And I just like had a day. So I just got out of the truck. I grabbed an S-Line FD, like that one of those swirly ones, and I just pumped it out there, and I threw it so far. I threw it into the woods at the bottom, like at the end of my field. I'm like, well, that's a good disc. And then I just don't think I ever got it. Now that I think about it. So I need to grab that again. But they're a good disc. And I think it just feels so nice. Leopard 3s don't like feel great in my hand, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't speak to the Leopard 3. I've got known feelings about the Leopard 3.
Yeah,
it's
I know.
Me and the Leo 3, we are not, we're not there. I'm all about Leo 1, the one that's upstairs.
Leo 1. Yeah. So, Leo 1's the best one in my opinion.
Well, my last is an iconic one in this conversation, and it is the family of 12.5-1-3. And it's, if you want to bag a destroyer, throw a Wraith. And if you feel like you don't have the arm speed for a Wraith, throw an Orc. And we were talking about this before the podcast started. The Orc is just a disc that I think more people should look at, more people should be interested in. It's a mold that I would be fine with Innova trying to bring it back and showcase it, because it wasn't run as many, like its consistency is still much better, I think, than the Destroyer, because it just wasn't run as many times as the Destroyer. There are inconsistent Orcs out there, and so I know that. I get that. If you're telling me if it's an Innova disc made before 2015, it's going to have inconsistencies. I get that. But the Orc is just really, really good for that distance driver, very trail-esque and how you're looking at it. But yeah, I just think more people who want to bag destroyers, if you want the destroyer flight, step down to a Wraith, step down to an Orc, and I think you're just going to find an easier time getting that flight that you're looking for. And even if you're forehanding it, I think that it's easier to step down and forehand those. And if you're like, oh, because there's so many plastics available now, if you're throwing the Wraiths and you're like, oh, I wish I had a more overstable Wraith, rather than even jumping into the, okay, I bought 4 destroyers off the shelf, but they're all different stamps from different runs and they all fly different. If you don't want to go on that hunt, just go find a Halo Wraith. And boom, you've found a destroyer. Like you found what you want the destroyer to be. So there's just a lot of options with that I think are really good. And I wish more people threw Wraiths. It's a great disc.
And your brother loves the Orc.
He does. So my brothers are, we chuckle because like between the three of us, my middle brother is an Orc guy, and he plays the least out of all of us. And then my oldest brother is a Wraith guy. He got us into Wraiths. And then I'm the only one that like has any chance of throwing a destroyer out of our crew. And even then I'm like, I just don't. I throw my Raiders. But we embody this to a T. And then my friend Jameson was an org guy, and he's the player that he started playing the same time I did. And Jameson, to this day, 13 years later, after we started playing, will still show up to the disc golf course with a putter and an orc in his hand. That's it.
That's fun. It's a good time.
It's a great disc. Great disc. So that wraps it up for the molds. How do we do, guys? Let us know in the comments. But also, like I said, let us know your if you want to throw this type deals, or if you disagree with some of the stuff we said. Obviously, we'd love to hear. We'd love to hear in the comments. So there are some other things, I'm sure, coming to the warehouse, Brad. So you want to close out with what's new in the warehouse?
Yeah, just do a brief recap. I think everyone's heard it. I mean, I think the biggest one is we do have some spots that reopen for a subscription box. So if you're hearing this, this is your last chance to grab them. They do have a trail. It does have a swarm. So the trail is custom stamped. The swarm has a custom overstamp. And there's 2 other putters in there and a swag item that is something we've never done before, which is a actual sports sack. So the value is insane in this box. Solid box, get it. There's only a couple spots left, so make sure you go grab that. Buzzra SS. I don't have one beside me. It's our new stamp that we did with Buzzra. They're on the old Swirly Tour Buzz SS's, so very cool. I forget which year that was from, but the stamp's awesome. It says as a pirate on a ship. It's so cool, so fun. We're glad to have them on board, so check those out. Those are going to be up. We're going to have some special Slinging Them discs, Dark Horse discs, so Glow Nuke and Glow Zones dropping, as well as a ton of stuff in the Dark Horse store, which is going to be something new that you're going to be seeing on there. There'll be some classic stuff like get beefies, get sneakies, OG roaches. I mean, anything and everything you want. There'll be new stuff. We're not going to get all of it up this week. I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of discs, but we're trying to get a little bit of a lot of stuff up so you all can have something to look forward to. And as always, you know, if you want to try something out, maybe you want to try to get beefy and you're like, oh, is it too much beef? You can try all that stuff risk-free with Foundation Care. So make sure you can search our app and check out our new website, Redesign. Shout out Big Hunt for doing that. Looks great. Has flight charts on there now. Has rim profiles for a lot of the discs on there. We're constantly updating that. New tool on there. You can actually compare discs. So if you want to compare the Quake and the Swarm and the Verdict, you can check them all, hit compare. It'll show you like price, plastic, rim profile, flight numbers, you know, all kinds of information you can look at side by side. And it also recommend other stuff like it at the bottom. So we try to make this very friendly for you all so you can search better. You can make better decisions. But if not, you know, you got Foundation Care. So, but I think with all those new tools, you're going to get your new disc in. You're going to love them because you're informed. And then when you get them in, you throw them and you love them. Where are they staying, Robbie?
Keep them in the bag. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.